Welcome to the Strive for Good Life podcast, where freedom and abundance meet entrepreneurship. We uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets of business owners who've built life on their terms. Ready to create your own success? Let's dive in.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Strive for Good Life podcast. My name's Nino, Pingera, and I'm here with Trista Guertin. I'm butchering that. I know it's got a better pronunciation, but she's a master life coach, and I'm so glad to have her on the show. So welcome, Trista.
Thank you, Nino. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I'm really excited because you've got a fascinating story. Just you've been all over the place, and specifically in Lebanon, which I really want to get into. But I always start the show asking people really how they got interested in business, and I know your journey's kind of been a little different. So, let's dive back into the past a little bit and start with what really brought you into eventually becoming a life coach.
All right. Well, I was a humanitarian aid worker for 20 plus years. So, yes, I've been traveling the world. I've been to 78 countries. I was living and working in some of those, but then others I went for fun. But I did land up living in places like Angola, Sri Lanka, Kosovo, Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon, as you mentioned, and a number of other places. And it was fun. It was great work. Absolutely. I mean, I was working with refugees most of the time. In Lebanon, we were working with Syrian and Palestinian refugees. So very rewarding, but also very demanding physically, emotionally, mentally. And while I enjoyed it, and obviously it was a very interesting lifestyle, I always sort of had my eye looking, okay, what am I going to do next? I knew wanted to transition. I wasn't about to be 65 and living in Afghanistan. No offense to Afghanistan, but I really just knew I didn't, I was going to transition at some point, but I had no idea what I was going to do. And if you had asked me, let's say 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I would have said I am not a business person, obviously, being in nonprofit and charity sector for so many years. I was definitely not an entrepreneur. I would have told you I don't have that bone in my body. Like it's just I didn't know anybody who had done that. But I, sort of got to a point where I was feeling a little bit stuck in a relationship and with my career and everything, and turned to life coaching. And that was very powerful for me. It was very helpful. And the program that I joined, they also had a certification program. And I sort of just looked at it and it sort of caught my eye. But I thought, well, maybe down the road that might be a good option to use for my transition. But then the next year, COVID hit and I landed up having all this extra time on my hands. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do this now, thinking at least that it would be helpful for myself. And then for my team, I was a manager at that time. So I thought, absolutely, as a leader and manager, these would be great skills to have. I started, I loved it. I just enjoyed it so much. I knew in advance, obviously, that the tools and skills that were being used were powerful and helpful. But I really did think that once I learned how to use them, that I was going to help as many people as I could to use them as well and to learn about them and be able to access them. And the school also provided assistance in creating your own business. And I just thought, that's it. Like that's what I'm going to do. And within a few months, I was, setting up the website and the logo and the business cards and all the things, coaching everybody I could, get my hands on. And I was doing that part-time on my evenings and weekends for 4 years before I returned to Canada in October and started coaching full-time. So here I am.
That's amazing. Your story is really interesting because, being in the nonprofit world, there is kind of this rub. Sometimes we think that it's so different from the way businesses operate. And so I'm really curious as to kind of how you saw that shift. And especially, not having any kind of business background. What was it like having to learn business skills just from scratch?
It was hard. Some days it broke my brain, I have to tell you. I remember at the beginning, people were talking about this funnel and there was something else. And I had no idea what they were talking, like just no idea. I was like, what is this? So it took me a while to there's a whole other lingo that's involved and just trying to understand all the bits and pieces. And it just seemed to me so huge. And it's funny because now 4.5 years later, I'm like, "Oh, okay, I can see the bits and the pieces," and it's a little bit more straightforward than I sort of imagined when I first started. It was because it was so brand new and there were so many things, and of course, you get on the internet and everybody says, "Here, get on LinkedIn, here, get on TikTok, here, do this, here, do this, here," and it's really difficult to filter out the noise and just realize, "Okay, I need A, B, and C, and this is what I can use to get started and go from there." And I do have clients who are new coaches, and so I'm really thrilled not just to help them sort of get over the fear and the doubt and the overwhelm, but also just to give them a bit of perspective and guidance in terms of what they actually need to be focusing on and connect the dots so that it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, it's tough for someone, especially because as a coach or as someone that's passionate about what you produce in the business, right? With you, it's your life-changing results, which is incredible. Um, but you're so focused on that and wanting to provide an end result for the customer that you're not even thinking about the back end and everything, all the technical aspects of business. And there's so much there. There's so many, it's not just one skill set, it's multiple skill sets that you have to develop. And it's tricky to navigate that. So I'm curious as to, you said you had to, narrow it down to ABC, right? The few things that you absolutely needed. What were those things? And, how did you go about like really, I guess, narrowing the scope so that you didn't get caught up in the millions of distractions out there, the shiny objects everywhere?
Well, I have to say it was going through all of the shiny objects and spending a lot of money and a lot of time. Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy, like, have my website, so I'm glad I have that. I've focused mainly on Instagram, so I'm happy with that, trying not to get sucked into TikTok and LinkedIn and all the things. I'm like, "Okay, I'm on one platform, that's fine." Having a simple lead magnet. I mean, to be honest, I've been using the same lead magnet now for almost 4 years and, the same ad, and it keeps bringing people in and it keeps working, and
Yeah.
I've really had to learn how to restrain myself because my brain keeps telling me, "Well, maybe you need a new one, maybe you need a different one," and I'm working, with someone and she's like, "It's working, leave it, don't touch it.
Yeah.
You don't need the new thing, right? It's okay." But it really I it's a little bit embarrassing, but I do have to say I sort of got sucked into all the things at
Yeah.
first, and I think after a while, I just wore myself out and spent so much money. I'm just like, "Okay, I have to stop. I have to just settle
Yeah.
down." But, it really was such a mental process because it really was difficult to understand and get clarity. I think maybe just because it was so new to understand that it doesn't have to be so complicated and that there really is a straightforward process. I
Yeah.
don't know, but
Yeah.
I struggle.
Well, when you're trying to wrap your head around something as ginormous as launching a business, right? And again, yeah, everyone's got something different to sell you. And so you're just overwhelmed with all of the different options. And so I really like what you said, right? One platform, one lead magnet, one ad. I mean, just keeping it very streamlined and simple, and then not, throwing it away when it works, just chasing something new, right? That you haven't even proven or tested yet. So
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of people's struggle when it comes to business is just that focus, being able to just focus and trust that, I'm going to do what works and I'm just going to stick to that and keep it running, right?
Right.
And so I think that's incredible advice for all our listeners out there. I mean, that's what I would tell people. Just focus on the one thing that works. So I think that's incredible. I'm really curious because you went through the certification to get your I guess master life coach title. Was that helpful? And how did you go about picking like the best program for that? I mean, for anyone out there that's maybe wanting to be a life coach, what would you say to them?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So I found a podcast years ago. I think it was back in like 2015, 2016. Wasn't really listening to it, downloading all the episodes, and then found myself in a place in 2017 where I was just really frustrated and let's say at the end of my rope and didn't know what to do with myself. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to sit. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I don't know why. I have no idea what struck me or why. And I remember flipping through this podcast and finding this episode. It was the Life Coach School podcast, Emotional Adulthood. And I sat and I listened to that. And I was like, oh, it made so much sense. And it really changed my life. And the basic premise is that I'm responsible for how I respond to external circumstances and I can't change other people. Now you can probably find a million other coaches and teachers and philosophers and gurus who will tell you the exact same thing. But for some reason, it really resonated with me in me that day, that way, and that teacher. And so I started listening to her podcasts, and again, it just made sense. And I think if you really take a look at any of them, Martha Beck, Tony Robbins, Eckhart Tolle, like they all have similar messages, right? But maybe they have a certain angle, a certain focus, but it's all fairly similar. I think you have to find the one that speaks to you and that really resonates to you. And that's what I found. And she was teaching a number of tools and skills. It actually took me a year and a half before I joined her program. And then once I did, I really got into it and started using them. And it just made sense to me. It was simple, it was straightforward, it was work, took effort, but it just made sense to me. And I knew they were powerful. I knew they could change my life. And frankly, some of it is really the secret to life. Like if you want to create results, you want to go to that next level, this works. And I just kept going from there. So she's not actually offering certification any longer in the way that she was previously. She's on a bit of a hiatus and she has this online program. I don't know if they'll be offering it again this year, but like I said, it just all resonated. It just all made sense. I felt really good about it. I knew that it worked for me, and I wanted to let as many other people know about it as possible.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Just the importance of finding a message that you connect with. I think it's really interesting because I speak to a lot of people, and I'll ask where their inspiration comes from, or and so I think it's fascinating that you just had a feeling to listen to whatever thing. So does intuition play a role in kind of how you've been able to make this work, or what would you say to that?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I have no idea what drove me to that podcast episode. And then again, the certification program, it was just like this little nudge. And this is what I tell people, like, listen to that nudge, listen to that little voice, like that whisper, whatever it is. Y- I had no idea. I mean, to sign up for a life coaching certification. I mean, I had not made that type of investment in a long time. And I had no idea. Like, I was just like, it looks good. It looks really interesting, and it could be. So I took that chance. I took that risk, but definitely there was that pull. I I don't know, but yes.
Yeah.
And so I do tell people that if you have that nudge, if you have that pull, listen to it. Like take it seriously. I think we're so used to ignoring it, pushing it down. We get busy with jobs and careers and relationships and kids and all these things, and so taking that time to slow down and to listen to it can be very helpful, life-changing.
Yeah. I feel like that's a common thread that I find a lot is just people that are wildly successful. They follow those promptings, those little nudges, those little feelings, and I find, yeah, it's so interesting. We just often like we're rationalizing in a way, we just say, oh, well, why would I do that? Why, it doesn't make any sense for me. And sometimes the most miraculous things can come when we follow something that doesn't make sense, when we take a risk on something new, right? And
Yes.
so I think that's always fascinating to hear people's perspective on that. I want to get into the challenges that you faced, because I know what you said, it was 4 years before you went full time kind of doing this. And so tell us a little bit about that, where you were doing it, how you went about trying to grow kind of as a side hustle, and how you eventually made the transition to full time.
Well, I started, as I said, just, evenings and weekends, and really having no idea what I was doing, but was just gonna take a stab. And I decided that I was going to offer free coaching sessions as sort of a way to meet people, and obviously, it's helpful for them, but just to start to get to talk to people and make an offer. And that worked really well. Like I said, like I got that lead magnet going in the Facebook ads and the Instagram ads, and that was bringing people in. And then I was offering a free coaching session, which was really working. I mean, this is back, 2022, 2023. I had people coming all the time. And then that started, was converting people into clients. I had somewhat of a limited bandwidth at that time, obviously, because I was also, I mean, being in the Middle East with the time change and that, I landed up having clients. I had one in Singapore and South Africa, in the, UK, Dubai, and then some in North America. So I was juggling the time zones as best as I could, and that worked fairly well. So I was, able to do it in the evenings, like 6 p.m. and whatnot. I found I only had a couple of hours of really good, um, sort of concentration and energy that I could use. Right, like, couple of hours, and then I was done, so I had to sort of manage that. But, yeah, I was bringing people in, and I was doing really well, and then I sort of hit some roadblocks personally. I don't wanna say roadblocks, maybe speed bumps, and some challenges personally and professionally in 2023, sort of when we got into Q2, Q3, and then Q4, that just sort of threw me off the game, and I sort of had to switch to just keeping the lights on in the business. I have a podcast called This Daring Adventure, so I was trying to keep that going. I had just a handful of clients. I was just sort of randomly posting on Instagram and whatnot, trying to keep things going, and it was challenging. I landed up being in South Lebanon, from I mean, I was in South Lebanon for a year and a half, which coincided with October, 2024. And so, y you know, October 7th happened in Israel, and October 8th, Hezbollah started, um, bombing Israel, and so there was this back and forth exchange. So I was close to the border, not close enough that I was seeing things every day, but close enough that I was hearing them, and that, of course, there were the drones and these mock raids and assassinations and things, and then yeah, also so that went on for a year. So that took a toll. That was very challenging and very demanding. So again, it basically just came down to keeping the lights on in the business. I absolutely refused to stop. I think there was a period where I didn't do my podcast, and had to, rearrange a few sessions, but absolutely refused to put it on hold. and just kept going.
I love that. I think it's so important. There's a guy that I followed a while back, who randomly was a game developer or something. I don't know how I stumbled across him, but I liked his process of marketing, and I'm a marketing guy, so I think that's what drew me to it. But he said something that's always stuck with me, and his thing was to never have a 0% day. And so, like, even if you can't do a lot, just do something, just to keep some momentum going. And I love that that's what you did, even in, the most challenging situations. You didn't relent. You kept going, even if it was baby steps, right? And I think that's so powerful, is just to keep moving. So anyone listening out there, that's incredible advice. Amazing example of someone that's done that. So I love that. I want to talk about how you made the transition to full time, and where, like, when did you finally get to that position where you were like, okay, I got to go all in on this?
I it was just a feeling. I was tired, like, I was done in Lebanon, like, that was enough. In total, I landed up spending 8 years there. So, and what had happened was I had extended my contract literally, like, a day or 2 before October 7th, 2024, or tw no, 2023, sorry, so 2023. So I had literally just signed my for that for that year when everything happened. So then the contract was ending, in mid-October 2024, and I thought, "Okay, this is it. I'm gonna go and give this a chance." And I really did believe that I could do it. I knew I had the product. I knew I have the tools and the skills to offer people and to help them with that transition or that transformation. And so I was just, yeah, excited to come home and have a bit of a change and a rest.
Yeah.
So
So
it did
far,
work like that.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It sounds like some of that was just circumstance. You had to get to a point where you're like, okay, like, I need to move on. I need to do something different. And so I think often that happens in our life, where it's almost as if fate kind of brings us to a point where we've got no other choice sometimes, but to jump in fully. And so I love that. Um, I want to talk about, so um, it sounds like you were doing, in terms of marketing, because I like getting into that. It sounds like you were doing Facebook ads. Was the podcast helping? I'm always curious to know, what are the things that are really working for people, and maybe, for our audience, what's something they can start implementing that will help. So what would you say to that?
Right. So yes, you're right. The Facebook ads, and they're obviously running on Instagram as well. So I have a lot of people who said they found me on Instagram and whatnot, and then signing up on Facebook for my freebie. The podcast too, I do have a number of people who have said, I'm listening to your podcast and this made sense. And so I wanted to jump on a call, or they were finally ready to take action and make a change. My podcast is small but mighty. It still has a small audience, but I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun, and I do see the growth slowly. So that's fun. I don't necessarily know that that's something that everybody needs to do when they're starting out, but I had this particular affinity for podcasts because, as I said, I started listening to that Life Coach School podcast, and it was just so helpful and so inspiring to me that I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily think I can have that same impact, but to me, it was just like such a powerful medium to reach people. And there's nothing I love more than going for a walk and popping in my earbuds and listening to a podcast as I walk. So I wanted to share that with people. Um yeah, I'm trying to think what else I really do. Like, just sort of randomly I'm posting on LinkedIn, and I've done a few YouTube videos, but nothing sort of serious, just for fun when I have some free time.
Yeah.
But that's it, I think, really. Um, I'm doing a number of podcast guest spots,
Yeah.
which is helpful in reaching new audiences and letting people know. I think that's a very powerful tool. Um, and I think that's quite interesting. If that's something that you enjoy, I think that can be really, really helpful. And then I haven't done much networking. I sort of put it off because being in Lebanon, I wasn't able to do much in-person networking and getting out or holding events myself or anything like that. But it's something that I kind of want to explore. I will tell you, I just went to my first in-person networking event last week. I've sort of hibernated over the past few months here in Canada. It hasn't been very pleasant. It was my first winter in Canada in 17 years.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit traumatic, and I was not keen on going out unless I absolutely had to.
Right.
So we'll see. I'd like to do more of that and integrate locally and meet people. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the thing that I've learned about marketing is that everything works. It doesn't maybe necessarily work for you though. You have to find what resonates, what makes sense with your personality and with your way. So, I mean, I think podcast is great if that's, if that works for you, if you like speaking to an audience in that way, right? Other people like being on camera. Other people are really great at networking in person. So you just got to find, and obviously try new things. I think that's important. But the idea is that in some way or another, you got to continuously put yourself out there. And so whatever way works for you, I think that's the big takeaway for me. So I love it. I love, that you're trying new things and that you're pushing yourself
Right.
in those ways.
And one of the sort of bonuses that I didn't realize when I started out with the podcast, but was that opportunity to refine my speaking skills and my messaging. I it never really occurred to me when I started, but I can really see and feel the benefits now that I'm far more comfortable. I think if you probably listen to the first couple of podcast episodes that I did, I sound very nervous and not so sure of myself. And now the more I've done it, obviously I just enjoy it and I feel like I'm improving all of the time. But it's really helped me to refine my message and just become more comfortable speaking. I've done a few presentations and speaking engagements virtually, and I've really enjoyed those too, and it's something that I want to do more of, but I don't think I would have been able to do that as comfortably and as, I don't know, with so much ease as I did without the podcast and just that opportunity to keep speaking and speaking and speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such an important skill to develop, right? And as you said, like we all sound terrible when we first start, there's such a learning curve, but you get comfortable. And like you said, your message becomes refined. And so I think that's incredible advice for anyone out there. Just jump into it and don't worry if you sound terrible at first. You'll get better. So I think that's great. I want to really, we're kind of pushing up on time a little bit, but really briefly, I want to talk about, um, the skills that you're a life coach, right? And there's such a crossover. I mean, I feel like entrepreneurship is the biggest self-development journey. And so all of these things that I'm sure you teach your clients would be so helpful. So maybe touch on a couple, maybe bigger pieces, things that would really help entrepreneurs, things that you teach your clients.
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I think whether it's any goal or any challenge, anytime you want to go to the next level, the fear, the doubt, the overwhelm, the confusion is going to come up. And I found it for myself, particularly trying to build this business and learn all of these things and just keep going when, the appointments aren't being booked or the calls don't come in or whatever it is, to really keep yourself focused and intentional and not get dragged off, I say, like in the ditch or in the weeds and become a victim to the story that your brain is telling you. it's that primitive part of our brain that's telling you this isn't working. You don't know what you're doing. You're not good enough. You're doing it wrong. Maybe we should quit. Maybe we should do something. And I've really have discovered, or not discovered, but created a focused sort of thought work daily process that I take myself through, which includes a little bit of meditation, but it's, looking at, okay, writing down what is my goal every day? Like, what is my goal? And I have my revenue goal that I want to create for the year. And then I have for the month. And then what do I want to think about that? What's the thought that I'm going to practice today and focus my brain intentionally on thinking to keep me in line and intentional? And then doing a bit of a visualization process about or of when I achieve that goal and how that's going to look and what I'm going to do and how I'm going to feel. You always, if you're visualizing, you always have to activate that feeling. And just taking myself through that process on a daily basis as much as possible really helps me to stay focused. And if you're thinking intentionally, then you're creating a feeling, and I try to create that determination, that energy, that focus, that motivation, and then my actions flow from there. So I'm showing up in a way that is going to help me to create that result that I want. But I really find that if I don't do that process, I can usually get away with maybe a week tops. And then I notice I've sort of like I'm in the weeds. I start, "Oh, I don't wanna do it." And so, especially in business, but with any big goal, it's, manage your mind or it will manage you. You have to be focused, you have to be intentional, you have to be purposeful in what you're thinking and then what you're feeling. And the other thing I would say is anytime you set that big goal, anytime you try to up level, the fear is gonna come up. And that's again just a part of our primitive brain trying to protect us. It's not necessary. It thinks it's doing its job. It thinks we're still living in caves, trying to survive on a day-to-day basis. So that fear and that doubt and that worry, it's going to come up, but it's not a stop sign. It just means that, you need to process that, allow that, and then go back to that, thought that you want to think intentionally to create the feeling of motivation or determination or discipline. And then you go. But the fear is not a stop sign.
I love that. That is incredible advice. I think that's a perfect way to really wrap this episode up. I know that it's been really powerful for me to meditate every morning. Like I feel it. If I don't if I don't do that, like you said, yeah, about a week without it, and I'm lost. My focus is elsewhere,
Mhm.
and I always have to recenter myself in that way and kind of get back to that habit. Um, but I think it's so fascinating, yeah, that you have this process for that, and I'm sure people listening would love to learn more. So where can people go to connect with you and maybe find out more about this stuff?
Right. So I have my website. It's tristaguertin.com. And then my podcast is This Daring Adventure. So it's on all the major platforms, but you can also go to thisdaringadventure.com and find all the episodes there. And then, as I said, Instagram is always a great place to find me. So that's Trista V. Guertin. I'm there. So
Perfect. We'll have all the links to that in the show notes. So if you're listening, go there to connect with Trista. This has been so fun. What's one final message that you would leave our audience?
don't believe everything you think. you know, we think up to 60,000 thoughts per day. Most of them are the same thoughts that we thought yesterday and the day before that and the day before that, and most of them aren't going to be helpful. So, start with that awareness that you don't have to believe everything you think. It's not all helpful, and then, take a few minutes in the morning to decide what you want to think instead and focus your brain that way. It's very powerful.
That is incredible advice. If we understood that and could do that, our lives would change dramatically. I know that.
Practice. It's a practice, right? You're not gonna be one and done. As long as you have that primitive part of your brain, it's still gonna, come up and say, "Oh," all the crappy thoughts will come up. But that's what you have to do. That's the work that we do in coaching is to overcome yourself, overcome those crappy thoughts that you have. And as long as you have a human brain, they're gonna come up. So this is the process that we teach, and this is the work that we do.
That's perfect. That's an amazing way to end this episode. Thank you so much for being here, Trista. For anyone listening, go to the show notes, connect with her, uh, share this episode with all those that maybe need to hear this, and make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again for being here, and for everyone listening out there, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks, Nino.